My name's Jeff, and I'm a musician currently out of work. My last band broke up after a big argument between the drummer and lead guitarist. Musicians can be pretty egotistical, always wrapped up in their own drama. I thought about getting a regular job, but the only things available are minimum wage gigs. Would you like fries with that? So, I started browsing the local musicians' classifieds, hoping to find a band looking for a guitarist or bassist. I could do either, and I can sing too. One ad stood out: a new classic rock band was looking for a bassist, and guitar and singing were a bonus. That fit me perfectly, so I wrote down the number. My only concern was that they were just starting, meaning fewer gigs and less money until they got established. But honestly, anything was better than working a fast food job. I called the number, and at first, I thought a woman picked up. Then, the voice on the other end introduced himself as John. I figured he was the singer. He had to be, especially if he was hitting those high notes. "Hey, my name's Jeff. Is the position still open?" I asked. "Yeah, we're still looking for a bassist. We've got a keyboardist, drummer, and guitarist." "What kind of experience do you have?" "I've been playing for about 15 years, and the last 7 have been professional." "What kind of music are you into?" John asked. "Anything, but I prefer classic rock. It's what my last band played." "What kind of gear do you use?" "I've got an Ibanez Prestige bass and a Gibson Les Paul hollow body. I can play either, and I can sing too, if needed." "Sounds like a good fit. We practice Saturdays at noon, if you want to come by and try out." He gave me the address. It was the drummer's place. I told him I'd be there and hung up. Saturday arrived, and I packed up my guitars and amps for the tryout. I just hoped this band wouldn't have the same issues as my last one. I had bills to pay. Finding the place was easy enough. It was an old house in a run-down neighborhood, but at least he owned his own home. I could barely afford my apartment. There were 3 cars parked in the driveway when I got there. Before unloading, I decided to knock on the door, just to make sure I was in the right spot. A skinny guy with long hair answered. I recognized the high-pitched voice as John's. "You made it," he said. "Yeah, I'll grab my stuff if you can hold the door for me," I replied. It took 5 trips to get everything inside. Once all my gear was in, John, who was also the keyboardist, introduced me to Robert, the guitarist, and Sam, the drummer. They all had long hair. I had shoulder-length hair, but theirs was a good foot longer than mine. I couldn't help but notice that John had a somewhat feminine vibe. I guessed he was probably gay. It didn't bother me, though. In this business, you learn to be accepting of all lifestyles. I'd even been accused of being gay a few times because of some of my mannerisms. Robert was blonde and pretty skinny, around 5 feet 10 inches, but he looked like a strong gust of wind could blow him over. He didn't have much facial hair and was very fair-skinned. He seemed nice, though, mild-mannered and laid-back. Sam was a brunette with similar features, not much facial hair, and barely old enough to drive. He was pretty skinny too, standing about 5 feet 6 inches. John, like Robert, was blonde, but shorter, about the same height as Sam. I'm a brunette, 5 feet 11 inches, and figured I was heavier and more muscular than the rest. I stayed in good shape, working out every day with no extra fat. Finally, we started playing. We kicked off with "Hit Me With Your Best Shot" by Pat Benatar. I was right about John being the singer. He could hit those high notes perfectly. After a few songs, they asked if I wanted to sing one. Robert and I swapped places. I grabbed my guitar, and he picked up his bass. They wanted to do "Lola" by the Kinks. It was a lower song, and John couldn't reach those notes. I'd always loved that song. Something about it had always stirred my imagination. Not that I was gay. I wasn't. And I didn't want to be with someone like Lola, a transvestite. Not that there was anything wrong with that. But I was a real man. I used to sneak into my mom's room when I was alone and try on her clothes. Kids in school always called me a sissy, so I worked out a lot to prove I wasn't. I wasn't a sissy. I was a real man. I sang the song well, and they had me sing a few others. After a few hours and about 20 songs, they decided I was a good fit. We scheduled another practice for the next weekend, and they already had a gig lined up for 2 weeks away, which was a relief because I needed the money. They handed me a list of the songs they did, along with some sheet music and a CD of a few originals they wanted me to learn. I packed up my gear and headed home. The following week, we played through all the songs we had practiced, plus another 20, including the originals. We had a gig lined up for the next Friday and Saturday night. They said I'd get $150 per gig, not bad for a new band. We also scheduled a practice for midweek. The gig's at a bar called Crickets, John told me. I wasn't familiar with it. I've never been there. Where is it? I asked. John gave me directions. I knew the area, it was the gay district, but that didn't bother me. The money was too good to pass up. See you there at 6 o'clock to set up. That should give us a couple of hours to get everything in place, John said. I arrived at 6 o'clock on the dot, parked by the back doors like John had instructed. 3 large, muscular guys were unloading equipment. You must be Jeff, one of them said. We're the roadies. Give me your keys, and I'll unload your gear and get it set up for you. Then I'll park your car. I was a bit taken aback, I'd never had a roadie before. This was a nice surprise. Maybe this gig wouldn't be so bad after all. I handed him my keys with a grin. Go inside and ask for Brad. He'll show you to the dressing room, he said. I was a little confused. I'd always just worn jeans and a t-shirt to gigs, but I figured I'd roll with it. I hoped it wasn't too formal. Inside, I saw a couple more muscular guys standing around. At least I felt safe with bouncers this size. I glanced at them, feeling a bit envious of their strength. I couldn't help but think of the irony. I'd worked my whole life to get as muscular as possible to prove I wasn't weak, and here I was, surrounded by guys who were more muscular than anyone I knew. I'm looking for Brad. I'm with the band, I told them. I'm Brad, one of them smiled. Come with me, I'll show you to the dressing room. Jessie picked out some clothes for you. This was getting stranger by the second. Who is Jessie, and how did she know my size? I was starting to wonder if this gig was really worth the money. Brad led me downstairs. The basement was set up with curtains hanging down the middle, creating a long hallway. At the end, he led me through one of the curtains. Inside, I saw a barber's chair and shelves filled with what looked like makeup. On one side of the room, there was a rack of women's clothes. I could hear voices coming from behind other curtains. One voice sounded familiar, it was John's. That made me feel a little better. Danielle will be in soon to help with your makeup and outfit, Brad said, then left me alone. I sat there, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. A few moments later, a large woman entered, and I quickly realized she was a transvestite. Lola popped into my head, and I couldn't help but chuckle. Hi, I'm Danielle, she said in a deep voice, making me chuckle again. Let's figure out what you're wearing before we start on the makeup. She pulled up my shirt. Nice flat stomach. With your skin tone, I think red would look great. Let's go with a red halter and a black mini skirt. Fishnets, calf boots, and low heels. I've heard you're new to wearing heels. Have you picked out a girl name yet? I was stunned. What are you talking about? I'm with the band, not a drag queen, I said, still in disbelief. It's a drag band. You have to dress up or you'll look out of place, silly, she replied. Just then, another woman came through the curtain. She was stunning. Jeff, you have to dress up. That's what we do in this band. It's a T-girl band, she said, and I recognized her voice as John's. I didn't agree to this, John. I'm out of here. Jessie, she replied calmly. What? Jessie. That's my name. I just stood there, speechless, before walking out of the dressing room. No way was I dressing up like a girl. In the hallway, 2 of those burly guys blocked my way. They grabbed my arms and dragged me back to the dressing room. Jessie looked at me and smiled. See? You have no choice. These 2 will be standing guard outside. You can cooperate, or you can end up in a lot of pain. I scanned the room. There was no way out. I sighed. Okay. Jessie smiled and went back to her room. The 2 big guys stood outside the curtain. I could see their feet under the fabric. Okay, back to work, Danielle chimed in. First, you need to undress. I did as she said, handing over my clothes to the big guys. Now there was no turning back. Now, let's take care of the rest, Danielle said. She pulled out a device and explained it was for the transformation process. I had no idea what to expect, but at that point, I just let it happen. Danielle looked me over and said, "At least you look the part now. Go ahead and put these on." She handed me a pair of black panties. I put them on as instructed. Sit in the chair, she directed, and I complied. She pulled out a towel soaked with hot water. This isn't the usual way we'll do this, but it'll work for tonight. She wrapped each of my legs with the towel, letting it sit for a few minutes before unwrapping the lower half of my right leg and applying warm shaving cream. She carefully shaved that section, then did the same with the rest of my legs. The sensation was strange, my legs felt unusually sensitive, and I could feel the slightest air movement. It was an odd but pleasant feeling. "You're lucky, we won't need to shave your chest since you don't have any hair there," she said. "Raise your arms, we need to shave your armpits." Again, I followed her instructions. Next, she brought out a bra. I lifted my arms to let her help me put it on. After fastening it, she went to her cabinet and pulled out a box. She opened it and took out a pair of silicone chests, placing one in each cup of the bra. "You're looking better already," she said. She then handed me a black garter belt and fishnets. "Put these on." I stared at the garter belt. "Which end is the front?" I asked. She laughed and showed me. After a bit of struggle, I managed to get the fishnets on. Next came the mini skirt and black calf boots with 2-inch heels. They were wide enough for me to walk in. She helped me slip on the red halter top and tied it in the back. "We can work on giving you more of a cleavage look later. You could definitely wear some sexier outfits." "You already look pretty good," she commented. Since there were no mirrors in the room, I had to take her word for it. Now that I was dressed, it was time for the makeup. A new girl entered and introduced herself as Shannon. She would do my nails, though I couldn't have long ones since they would get in the way of my playing. I sat in the chair, letting Danielle and Shannon work. It felt strange, but somewhat enjoyable, all the attention from 2 attractive women. Then I remembered Danielle wasn't a real woman, and I wasn't sure about Shannon either. The confusion was starting to set in. Time seemed to drag on but also pass quickly. Eventually, they were done. Danielle spent another 15 minutes styling my hair. "Okay, you can get out of the chair now," she said. I stood up, and she motioned for me to look in a certain direction. When I did, she opened a curtain, revealing a beautiful girl. No, it was me. I was staring at myself in a mirror. "What are you going to call yourself?" Danielle asked. Suddenly, an Aerosmith song popped into my head, "Dude Looks Like a Lady." Another one followed, "Janie's Got a Gun." Janie, I said, with a slightly different spelling, but that would be my name. "Hi, Janie," Jessie said, walking in with 2 other girls. This is Lindsay, and this is Samantha. Are you ready to rock this place? She grinned. Let's do it. And just like that, I was starting a new chapter in my life. As we made our way to the stage, my nerves kicked in. My heart raced, and my knees felt weak. The girls had to help me get up on stage. There was already a good crowd, and I heard a few cheers, which I figured were meant for the other girls. None of them looked like guys, but that was okay. They weren't, and neither was I. The equipment was set up. We adjusted things to our liking, making sure all the amps had power, tuning our guitars, and testing the sound. We did a quick sound check to ensure the mics were working. After a brief run-through of one song, the sound tech made some final adjustments. Janie! I heard someone call. It was Brad, standing at the edge of the stage. I just wanted to tell you how beautiful you look. I brought you a drink to calm your nerves. Thanks, I said, taking the drink. I don't know what came over me, but I bent down and kissed him on the cheek. It left a lipstick mark. He smiled and gave me a big grin. Thankfully, my makeup covered up the redness creeping up my cheeks. I took a sip of the drink, which had a tropical taste and was surprisingly strong. I'd probably need a little liquid courage for the night ahead. Janie, come on! Lindsay called from backstage. We went backstage to check our makeup one last time. Lindsay helped me fix my lipstick. Okay, is everyone ready? Jessie asked. Janie, when do you want to sing? Not in the first set. I need to get used to this first, I replied. Let's go! Samantha yelled, and we headed toward the stage. We rushed back on stage, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The moment had finally arrived. I took a sip of my drink to calm my nerves, then grabbed my bass guitar. We kicked off with upbeat rock songs, wanting to energize the crowd from the get-go. It seemed to be working. They were cheering loudly, and there were at least 100 people in the audience, a mix of guys, girls, T-girls, and T-guys, all gathered around the stage, waving dollar bills and shouting. During and between songs, we'd gather the money, give handshakes or quick pecks to the people offering tips, and add it to a big jar near the drummer. We played, and I felt on top of the world, fueled by the excitement and whatever drink Brad had handed me. Every time I finished one, Brad appeared with another. I also noticed he stayed on my side of the stage, ensuring I was the one to collect the tips. I even gave him another quick peck on the cheek, noticing that he hadn't wiped off the lipstick mark I'd left earlier. I giggled and thanked him as he handed me another $1. Finally, the first set ended. We rushed backstage, and I was sweating, heart racing, ears pounding. I felt so high I wasn't sure if my feet were even touching the ground. Backstage, Danielle and a few other girls helped us change outfits and touch up our makeup. This time, I wore a black corset and a silver mini-skirt. After a short 15-minute break, we were ready to hit the stage again. This time, I would be singing the first few songs. When we returned to the stage, Jessie grabbed the microphone. "Are you ready to rock some more?" she shouted. The crowd roared. "What? I can't hear you," she teased, and the crowd cheered even louder. "Let me introduce the band," she said. "I'm Jessie, and on drums, the beautiful Samantha." The crowd went wild. On guitar and bass, we have the very blonde Lindsay. Another cheer. "If you want to talk to her, please use small words." The crowd erupted with laughter. And last but not least, our newest member, on guitar, bass, and now singing a few songs, the magnificent Janie. The biggest cheer of the night followed. I sang several songs, starting with Lola, then Feel Like Makin' Love by Bad Company, White Wedding and Rebel Yell by Billy Idol, and I'm on Fire by Bruce Springsteen. After that, Lindsay and I switched again, and we played 5 more songs before the second set ended. Backstage, we changed again and touched up our makeup. This time, I wore a tight, silver sequin dress, with a cincher underneath to accentuate my figure. I also slipped into silver heels. That turned out to be a bad idea, as I nearly tripped several times during the third set. Despite that, the set went well. By the end, I was exhausted, as were Jessie, Lindsay, and Samantha. We collapsed backstage, but we weren't done yet. We were called out for 2 encores. Finally, we were able to collapse backstage for good. Danielle had brought my regular clothes, and she had packed up my girl clothes and makeup in a neat suitcase. "These are yours to keep," Jessie began. "For tomorrow's gig, you'll get $200, just like the rest of us. We've deducted for the clothes, and we'll divide the tips evenly. I'll take the money to the bank to get it properly counted, then give you your share tomorrow. Now that you know what we're about, we'll be dressing in our usual gender, female, not just for gigs, but also for practices. We all live as women 24/7. You can change into your male clothes now, or there are more casual women's clothes in your suitcase if you prefer." The 3 of them were switching into women's jeans and casual tops. I decided to follow suit, especially since my face was already done up. I packed away my male clothes and pulled out a pair of women's jeans and a pink blouse. I also slipped on some low-heeled ankle boots. "So, how did you know I would go along with this?" I asked. "We were reading you every time we got together," Lindsay explained. "At first, we were going to just have you dressed as a guy. But after watching how you reacted to certain things, we thought you might be open to it." She continued, "So we set this up. The bouncers wouldn't have actually hurt you if you'd resisted too much. They were just there to help you confront your own desires. One of my favorite things in life is seeing someone embrace their true self after living a lie." "Are you 3 gay?" I asked. I realized it might sound naive, but I was confused by my own feelings, and I hoped understanding my bandmates better would help me understand myself. "Lindsay has a boyfriend. I haven't found the right one yet," Jessie replied. "I'm still looking." Samantha likes to play the field. She's into both men and women. Speaking of which, Samantha said with a mischievous grin, "I want to get out there and see if I can get lucky tonight." She peeked out the stage door. "Your boyfriend's waiting out there. And Lindsay, yours too. I think Brad's into you, Jeannie." She gave a sly smile. We headed out of the backstage area, and sure enough, Brad was there waiting, along with Lindsay's boyfriend, Dan. Brad offered to carry my suitcase, and I let him. Groups of guys were gathered around Samantha and Jessie, trying to catch their attention. "Usually, we go to the family restaurant down the street to unwind after a show," Lindsay said. "Grab some fries and Pepsi, just relax and chat. Want to come?" "Sure," I replied. "I'll drive you," Brad offered. "You look a little tipsy." When we arrived at the restaurant, there were 8 of us, including the guys Samantha and Jessie had picked. We took a big booth, with Brad sitting right next to me. He took my hand and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I blushed under my makeup, my body tingling. I kept thinking to myself, I have a boyfriend. Wait, I'm not gay. I can't have a boyfriend. I was so confused. We finished a large plate of fries and a couple pitchers of Pepsi. Brad kept holding my hand the entire time. When it was finally time to leave, Brad offered to drive me home. "You still look a little tipsy," he said. I knew it was an excuse. I was sober by now, but I let him drive me home anyway. Once we arrived, he carried my guitars and equipment into my apartment. After that, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me on the lips. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the feeling. It felt so right. I felt small and feminine in his embrace. "How are you going to get home?" "You drove my car here," I asked when we broke the kiss. "I'll walk," he replied. "You can crash on my couch," I offered. "I'll drive you home in the morning."